Hi, I'm Rowena. My parents left me on the side of the highway while I was in labor because my sister had a spa appointment. Not a heart attack, not a wedding, a massage. And when I thought that was the worst of it, I found out they used my name to buy her a house. They forged my signature while I was giving birth in the back seat of a stranger's car. You ever wonder how far a family will go to silence the child they never really wanted? When the text from my mother popped up, I was folding tiny onesies on my bed. "It'll be easier if you're here," it read. "We can take care of you before the baby comes." On the surface, it sounded warm, maternal even, but something in my chest tightened as I reread it. I'd learned, over 32 years, that with my mother, kindness always carried fine print. Still, Mason was flying to Texas for 2 weeks, and the idea of not going into labor alone felt like reason enough. I packed a single duffel and told myself I was doing it for the baby, not for the sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents would treat me like a daughter again. I arrived at the house just before noon, the Arizona sun high and arrogant overhead. The front door opened before I knocked. My mother looked pristine in yoga whites, her hair twisted in that too-perfect bun she wore when she wanted to look spiritual. "You look flushed," she said, not unkindly, just observational, like a doctor noting a rash. "We've got cucumber water in the fridge. Hydration is essential at this stage." She ushered me in, and I stood in the foyer, suitcase in hand, expecting someone, anyone, to say, "Let me take that." No one did. I walked toward my old room, instinctively, only to stop in the doorway. My bed was gone. In its place, a faux wood backdrop with a printed lotus design, a halo light ring on a tripod, and stacks of folded lavender towels. The scent of eucalyptus burned faintly in the air. "That's Valora's streaming room now," my mother said, appearing behind me. "I see that," I replied. "You'll be in the sunroom," she added. "It gets lovely light in the mornings." Lovely light, but no door. No privacy. Just a foldable cot and a paper-thin blanket that smelled like citrus and regret. I forced a smile and dragged my bag to the far corner. "Welcome home!" By dinner time, it became clear I wasn't a guest. I was a variable to be managed. I sat at the edge of the couch, sipping lukewarm soup, while Valora gave a TED talk to her phone about the power of inner peace. Every clink of my spoon felt like sabotage. Later that night, I brought up my due date. How close it was. How I could go into labor any time now. "That's why it's important to stay energetically aligned," my mother said, arranging crystals on the coffee table without looking at me. "Valora has a big shoot at the spa on Thursday. It's important she's undisturbed." Undisturbed. That was the word they kept circling. My body's needs, my daughter's imminent arrival, all secondary to Valora's serenity. "They're calling me the face of postpartum harmony," Valora chimed in from the hallway, not even glancing up from her phone. It was then that the itch started. That old, bitter crawl under my skin. I'd felt it before, growing up. The way my triumphs were footnotes, and Valora's C average got a celebratory dinner. But this wasn't a forgotten birthday, or a missed recital. This was my body preparing to bring life into the world, and they were worried about preserving Wi-Fi strength for a live stream. The next morning, I walked past the hallway that led to my father's study, and stopped. A new family photo hung where my high school diploma used to be. Blown-up canvas, professional lighting, my parents, Valora in a champagne blouse. Even the dog had a bow tie. I wasn't in it. "Was this from Thanksgiving?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My father looked up from his coffee. "You weren't here, were you?" I blinked. "I took that picture." He said nothing, just sipped, looked out the window. That night, I opened my journal, the one I'd hidden between the mattress and cot frame. I wrote without pausing. They don't want a daughter. They want a placeholder, a support role with no lines. I put the pen down. For the first time since arriving, I stopped trying to belong. This wasn't refuge. This wasn't family. This was a performance, and I wasn't part of the cast. The second morning in that house didn't start with sunlight or the scent of coffee. It started with the dull pulse of bass from a playlist labeled Vibrational Balance and Valora's voice floating through the thin drywall like a chant. I blinked my eyes open on the narrow cot, the scratchy blanket sliding off my stomach. I reached for my phone. It was barely 7:30. The ring light in her room buzzed faintly, mixing with the rustling of silk and soft affirmations. I didn't need to peek to know what was happening. Valora's Monday mood reset stream was in full swing. She never skipped a Monday. Didn't matter if someone had just died. Or in my case, might go into labor any minute. I dragged myself out of the cot and stepped into the hallway, drawn by curiosity or stubbornness, I wasn't sure. Her door, my old door, was cracked just enough. Inside, she stood in front of the camera, barefoot on a yoga mat, palms pressed in front of her heart. Candles flickered beside Himalayan salt rocks. She looked serene, luminous, like she had created her own orbit. "Align your soul before Monday finds you," she whispered to the screen, voice like a boutique meditation app. I took one more step toward the door, and that's when I heard her, the gatekeeper. "Rowena!" My mother's voice cut through the hallway, hushed but sharp. "Valora's live. Please don't interrupt her frequency." I froze. She pointed to a laminated sign taped outside the door. "Do not knock," in block letters. Where my name used to hang in gold cursive on a wooden plaque, there was now this sterile command. "I just needed my bag," I whispered. "She's centering herself," Mom said, as if that answered anything. "Let's respect her process." I looked at the door, then at her. "I'm 38 weeks pregnant." My mother's smile didn't budge. "Which is why staying grounded is so important right now. Energy can affect labor." I started to reply, but Dad passed by in his slippers, holding a mug, glancing at me the way someone glances at the garbage can when it's full but not their turn. "Only 20 minutes, he muttered, waving his coffee toward the hallway. "Can't you just be still?" "Can't you just be still?" That phrase wrapped around my ribcage like a rope. It wasn't about peace. It wasn't about wellness. It was about control. Control disguised as compassion. Later, when Valora finally finished, I waited until she left the room in her flowing white cardigan. She didn't even glance at me. I stepped inside. Gone were my childhood posters of horses and cheesy pop stars. The corkboard full of school ribbons, college brochures, and scribbled poems vanished. In their place, a diffusing lamp shaped like a lotus, bins of crystals labeled by function, and a giant mirror etched with the words, "Stillness is strength." My hospital bag wasn't in the corner where I'd left it. "Where's my bag?" I asked aloud, though no one was there. From behind me, Valora's voice floated in. "I moved it. That space needed more flow." I turned to face her. She wasn't apologetic. "It's in the hall, bottom drawer. I labeled it for guest use. My baby's onesies, my medical documents, my going home outfit, in a drawer labeled guest use." I walked back to the cot and sat. Not because I was tired, but because standing felt like submitting. That evening, I pulled out my journal again, the one I hadn't opened since before the flight. On the first page, I wrote in block letters, "I am not part of this narrative. I am the static they edit out." I took a deep breath, closed the journal, and reread Mason's last message. "Only 2 more days, babe. Hang in there." I stared at the phone for a long time, wanting to text him back, needing something, someone, to make this feel real. Instead, I lay on my side on the cot, staring at the ceiling fan that turned like it had nothing better to do. People think silence is peaceful, that quiet is good, that not being yelled at is the same as being safe. But silence can smother, quiet can suffocate, and when people say, "We just want things calm," what they often mean is, "We want you gone," and I wasn't going to be gone anymore. I woke up to a tightness in my lower back that I chalked up to sleeping on that stiff cot again. The sun was already leaking in through the blinds, casting soft lines across the hardwood floor. I pushed myself up slowly, one hand under my belly. Nothing new, I thought. Just late pregnancy aches. A hot shower and some food would help. In the kitchen, the table had been cleared, except for a small crystal tray and a white placard that read, "Leora is fasting. Please respect the energy zone." I opened the fridge to grab something quick and found a plastic container labeled Rowena, avoid onions, conflicts with diffuser blend. They'd boxed my breakfast like I was a catering order. Eggs, plain toast, and half an avocado. Cold. I took it out and sat alone at the edge of the kitchen counter, the only light coming from the far window, where succulents lined the sill like quiet witnesses. Valora floated in, wearing silk again, her hair wrapped in a towel turban. She caught a whiff and wrinkled her nose. "That smells aggressive." I didn't respond. There wasn't any point. Mom followed behind her, lighting a stick of something sandalwood-scented. "Maybe just eat in the den, sweetie," she suggested. "It's better for everyone's frequency." I scooped another forkful, bit back the retort building in my throat. Funny how silence never applied to them. Only to me. Halfway through the meal, my fork slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I bent slowly to pick it up, and the moment I did, a sharp, rolling pain gripped my belly and back like a vice. Not an ache, not a stretch. This was different. I gasped, one hand clawing at the counter for balance. Valora stopped mid-step. "Are you doing that on purpose?" she asked, blinking. "Mom, she's disrupting the field again." The pain eased but left my skin damp with sweat. I straightened, breath shallow, heart pounding. Mom approached, calm as ever, with her voice dipped in condescension. "Are you sure it's real labor? You can be dramatic when you're tired." I met her eyes and said through clenched teeth, "Every 7 minutes. I've been tracking since 5 a.m. Dad shuffled in, cup of coffee in hand. He glanced at me hunched over the counter, then at the two women standing motionless. "You want to sit on the floor or go to a yoga mat?" he asked without sarcasm. Just indifference. That was the moment I realized. No one here was going to do anything. They wouldn't take me to the hospital. They wouldn't even Google what active labor looked like. I was an interruption. "I think we should wait until after Leora's healing bath," Mom said, almost to herself, already moving on to light another candle. I didn't answer. I walked out the back door, my phone tight in my grip. Outside, I stood under the shade of the carport, trying to breathe slowly. I pulled up my OB's text from earlier in the week. "Time the contractions. If they're consistently under 6 minutes apart, go straight in." I tapped the timer. 6 minutes, then 5, then another at 4.5. My palms were trembling, my legs unsteady. "They're going to ignore this until I bleed on the floor," I whispered. I paced the concrete for a few more minutes, trying to will the pain away with logic. But logic wasn't going to deliver this baby, or protect me from the next contraction. I turned and walked back inside, where the diffuser mist was still curling around the hallway, like a ghost with a purpose. I lowered myself down onto the cool tile, leaned against the baseboard, and looked at nothing. "This isn't home," I murmured. "This isn't even neutral. This is a danger zone painted with lavender." And then, another wave of pain tightened through my spine like a warning. I waited by the door, one hand resting on the handle of my suitcase, the other pressed to the small of my back. The contractions were still 5 minutes apart, steady, stubborn. My phone buzzed again. "Mason, you okay? Haven't heard from you." I didn't respond yet. I stepped back inside the house. Valora was in the kitchen, her face slathered in some kind of mint-colored mask, humming off-key to a sound bowl track playing from her phone. My mother, seated on the couch with a headset and microphone, was deep into recording her latest podcast. The sign on the door read, "Recording in progress. Please whisper only." I cleared my throat. "It's time," I said. "I need to go. Now." Valora didn't even flinch. She kept swirling the honey into her tea like I hadn't spoken. Mom pulled off one ear of her headset, slightly annoyed. "Rowena, you can't just barge in when I'm channeling clarity." I'm in labor, I repeated. Every 5 minutes. I've tracked the last 3 hours. She looked at me like I'd just told her the recycling bin was full. Do you know what this kind of energy can do to Valora's nervous system right before a shoot? She'll survive, I said, sharper than I intended. Dad appeared behind me, sipping from a tall glass of water like nothing was happening. Can this wait until after her sound bath? He asked, genuinely perplexed. They weren't even pretending anymore. My contractions were a nuisance, not a crisis. I turned away from them and started pacing the hallway, my fingers gripping the railing every time the pain clawed at my abdomen. I tried deep breaths. I tried logic. None of it worked. From the living room, I caught the tail end of Mom's podcast audio as she played it back into her headphones. Her voice sounded syrupy sweet through the air. True healing begins when a family uplifts its most sensitive member, she said. We've all grown together, even Rowena. She's found peace in silence. I froze. Even Rowena. Peace in silence. That wasn't just fiction. That was weaponized delusion. She was building a public story about how we were one big mindful family, while I was literally contracting alone in a hallway. I walked to the edge of the living room and stared at her. You said I've found peace? I asked. She took off the headset slowly. Sweetheart, it's a metaphor. People relate to evolution. I'm not evolving, I snapped. I'm dilating. The pause that followed was so thick, I could have torn it open with my teeth. I need to go, I said again. Now. Valora's still resetting her breath cycle, Mom murmured, checking her phone. And that was it. The final straw wasn't a scream or a shove. It was her phone. I walked back to my cot, dragged out the duffel bag I'd packed out of instinct days ago, and zipped it shut. I didn't wait for another contraction to remind me how alone I was in that house. I rolled the suitcase to the front door. No one followed. No one asked where I was going. My phone buzzed again. This time I opened it. You okay? Haven't heard from you. I typed slowly. Not yet. But I will be. I stepped out onto the driveway, the suitcase wheels humming against the concrete. The sun was lowering, casting long shadows across the lawn. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew I wasn't staying. I rolled my suitcase to the front door with one hand, while the other clutched my phone, screen lit, contraction timer still running. 5 minutes, 23 seconds. The steady rhythm of pain hadn't let up. I'd showered, dressed, and packed my hospital file, knowing better than to count on anyone in this house to do it for me. I'll call a cab myself, I said, my tone flat but unshaking. It's time. Halden barely glanced up from his Kindle. It'll stress Valora. She's in pre-spa meditation. Behind him, the sound of chimes drifted through the hallway. Valora's music playlist, floating from the speaker like a twisted lullaby. She was lying on the sofa with cooling gel patches over her eyes. Cucumber slices would have been too cliché for her brand. You're just cramping, my mother said, without turning from the stove. It's psychosomatic. Eat something and rest. You always overreact when you're overwhelmed. I stared at her back. The kitchen smelled of turmeric and lentils, not empathy. Valora pulled off one gel patch and blinked lazily at me. This is why you can't center yourself, Rowena. You operate from chaos. The word psychosomatic sliced through the room like a scalpel. For a moment, the contraction pain paled in comparison to the sting of being accused, again, of being dramatic. Still, they must have sensed something. Maybe it was the way I gritted my teeth, or the silence that followed. But Halden sighed, stood, and said, Fine, let's go. I didn't feel relief. I felt like a box being shipped out because it was leaking. In the car, Valora took the back seat and reclined it immediately, earbuds in, lavender oil smeared on her temples. Halden adjusted the mirror without looking at me. No one asked how close my contractions were. No one even asked if my hospital bag was packed. I was a passenger in every sense of the word. 10 minutes into the drive, another contraction hit. This one dropped me forward, and I let out a sound, raw, involuntary. She's going to do this the whole ride? Halden muttered under his breath. Maricel didn't respond. She turned her head toward me, not with concern, but with that same expression she used when the dog tracked Mud into the foyer. "Pull over," she said, like she was ordering coffee. Halden complied. He eased the car to the shoulder of Highway 101. Cars roared past in both directions, the wind gusting against the metal frame, as if nature itself knew something was off. "What are you doing?" I asked, voice sharp now. Maricel leaned between the seats. "We can't do this right now, not with Valora's shoot tomorrow. She needs a calm environment." "I'm in labor." "You'll be fine," she said. "Plenty of women give birth in Ubers." She opened the door. I thought it was a joke until she stepped out and gestured for me to do the same. "You're not seriously—" "Rowena," Halden interrupted. "We're not equipped for this. You're strong. You've always been strong." I got out. Not because I agreed, but because the alternative was begging. The door closed, the engine revved, and they were gone. Dust clung to my lips. The sun was merciless. I stood there, hand on my belly, the gravel biting through the soles of my sneakers. No trees, no buildings, just the endless stretch of road and the slow crawl of time between contractions. I sat on the edge of the ditch, one shoe slipping off. My phone screen was nearly unreadable under the glare, but I tried to dial 911. No service. Of course, I opened my ride app. For a moment, nothing. Then, blessed be, a ping. A driver accepted. ETA. 6 minutes. 6 minutes. That might as well have been a lifetime. When the car finally arrived, it wasn't a sedan or a black SUV. It was a red minivan, slightly faded, with a bumper sticker that read, "Ask me about grandkids." The driver got out, older, graying at the temples, no-nonsense energy. She took one look at me and didn't hesitate. "Get in," she said. "You're not dying on my watch." I didn't cry. Not yet. There would be time for that. Her name was Lisette. She didn't ask questions. She didn't hesitate. She didn't wonder if I was being dramatic or overreacting. She simply opened the passenger door of her van, locked eyes with me, and said, calm and certain, "We're going. You just hold on." And I did. I gripped the seat as she pulled away from the shoulder of Highway 101. My suitcase tumbled and thudded behind us, hitting the back of the seat with every curve in the road. Sweat ran down the back of my neck, soaking into my shirt. Each contraction came like a wave too big to duck under, long, crushing, unforgiving. The spaces between them disappeared until I couldn't remember what it felt like not to be in pain. "You're doing good," Lisette said, her eyes catching mine in the rearview mirror. "I delivered a calf once in the back of a pickup in Payson. This can't be much worse." I let out a strangled sound, somewhere between a sob and a laugh. "Not sure that's making me feel better." She grinned. "It will. When it's over, it will." The drive to Phoenix was only 25 minutes, but each second dragged out like molasses, thick, slow, endless. Every red light felt like a personal attack. Every pothole in the road felt like a cruel joke played on my spine. I focused on Lisette's voice. It had the rhythm of someone who had lived through storms, who knew how to speak just enough and no more, who knew how to be calm for two. When we finally pulled into the ER, the sun was setting behind the mountains, casting the sky in streaks of red and orange like some kind of cosmic warning. Lisette hadn't even turned off the engine when the worst contraction yet tore through me. I screamed. There was no grace in it, no modesty, just raw, unfiltered agony. "Hold on," she said quickly, throwing the door open and running toward the entrance like her own life depended on it. Through the blur of sweat and panic, I saw her gesturing frantically, her arms slicing through the air, calling for help. But it was too late. My body had made its decision, and it wasn't waiting on doctors or sterile rooms. I braced myself, legs trembling. I couldn't speak anymore. I couldn't think. A nurse rushed over, snapping gloves onto her hands mid-stride. But I already knew. The pain gave way to something undeniable. something final, and then everything blurred. Except her hand. Lizette's hand found mine. Warm, steady, strong. "You got her," she whispered, her face close. "You're not alone." And just like that, my daughter was born. Not in a delivery room, not surrounded by family or cameras or celebration, but in the front seat of a stranger's van, beneath streetlights, under a sky-bleeding twilight. No applause, no fanfare, just breath, just blood, just survival. They rushed us inside. The nurse cut the cord. I heard voices and saw bright lights, but Lisette stayed. She stayed until they started nudging her toward the door. Before she left, she placed a soft towel in my hands, the one she'd used to cradle the baby. "You're stronger than you know," she said. "You'll be okay. I believe it." Hours later, I sat alone in a hospital bed, my daughter sleeping soundly against my chest, wrapped tight. I named her Lyra. Her name, like music. At 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Maricel. "Glad everything went okay? Leora says congrats. No heart emoji. No, are you all right? No, is she healthy?" Just a hollow, sterile line that felt like it came from an auto-generated message. I didn't respond. I kissed Lyra's forehead, inhaling the smell of her. New, clean, real. I whispered, "You will never question if I chose you." 3 days passed. On the third morning, the nurse brought me a small box someone had left at the front desk. Inside, a granola bar, a bottle of water, a soft fleece blanket, and a note. "You were never alone. Not then, not now. If you need a witness, I'm your woman." Lisette. I read the words over and over. My throat ached. I tucked the note into my diaper bag, right next to the unopened bank statements I hadn't dared face since I left home. It almost made me laugh, the bitter irony of it all. My own mother couldn't be bothered to sit by me during the hardest moment of my life, but a woman I didn't even know had held my hand without flinching. I looked down at Lyra again. Her tiny chest rose and fell, so steady, so brave already. "If they could leave me in labor," I said softly, "then they've already left behind everything that ever mattered." I wrapped the blanket tighter around us, feeling her warmth seep into me like hope. "They'll see," I whispered. Soon enough. The third morning in the hospital arrived quietly, as if the world had agreed I'd had enough noise. Lyra was swaddled beside me, pink-cheeked and calm, her little breaths the only rhythm I needed. I kept waiting for the door to open, for someone, anyone, with my blood to walk in and say, "We were wrong. We should have been here." But silence again proved louder than presence. The only sound from them came as a buzz on my phone. One notification, one line. "Glad everything went okay. Leora says congrats." No question mark, no warmth. Just a brushstroke of dismissal disguised as etiquette. I read it aloud, more to the room than to myself. "Glad everything went okay. Leora says congrats." As if I had just finished a tax audit instead of giving birth alone in a truck. The nurse who'd been helping me that morning entered with a smile. "Any family visiting today?" I shook my head. "They have another daughter to center." She didn't ask more. She didn't have to. Her face said enough. Later, while Lyra napped, I did the worst thing I could have done to myself. I opened Instagram. Valora had posted a spa robe selfie in soft lighting, her caption in that perfect airy tone she used whenever she was about to throw a digital grenade. "Sometimes to heal, you must release those who are no longer vibrating with your truth." She had 4,200 likes in 2 hours. The top comments read, "So brave, Leora. Cut the toxicity, girl. Family isn't always blood." I stared at the screen until it blurred. Then I saw it. Mom had liked the post, shared it even. There it was. In a matter of 2 scrolls, my entire family had rebranded my abandonment as spiritual detachment. I wasn't betrayed. I was simply not aligned. That's when I knew this wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about narrative, and they were rewriting mine without permission. I closed the app and deleted the family group chat. Then, I blocked my mother's number. Not permanently, but long enough to breathe. I sat on the floor beside Lyra's bassinet, legs crossed, fingers tracing the edge of the baby blanket. "If you ever ask me why I walked away from them," I whispered to her, "I'll tell you the truth. And I'll still tell you to love better than they did." That night, while she slept soundly, I stayed up at the kitchen table in my small apartment, surrounded by paperwork. Medical records, bank statements, the delivery report, the text from Maricel, screenshots of Valora's post, and Mom's like. I opened a new folder on my laptop. Title: Evidence. Anger didn't boil anymore. It froze, it sharpened, it turned into something methodical. I wasn't just abandoned, I was being erased, replaced, reframed. I filed each document carefully, one by one. If they wanted a performance, I'd give them one. But mine would come with footnotes, timestamps, and proof they couldn't delete. 10 days postpartum, I opened the email I'd been avoiding. The subject line: "Suspicious activity detected on your account." It wasn't the first one. They'd trickled in over the past week, like slow drips from a leaky faucet. But now, in the quiet of my apartment, while Lyra napped, I had no excuses left. I clicked in. There were 3 separate alerts, each tied to a mortgage inquiry, a loan application, and a completed purchase, all under my name. I opened the documents. There it was, my full legal identity tied to the deed of a property I'd never seen, never stepped foot in, and right beneath my forged signature, her name, Maricel Fay. The air thinned, not just because it was fraud, but because it was deliberate. This wasn't a forgotten authorization or a mistaken form. It was a plan. I dug deeper: credit reports, financial traces, linked accounts. They hadn't just used my name to fund the spa. My mother had lumped her personal credit card debt into a wellness business expansion loan, co-signed by me, without my knowledge, while I was on bed rest. This wasn't negligence, I said aloud. This was a strategy. I printed every document, laid them across my bed like battle plans. The bank statements, the email confirmations, even the delivery timestamps. They all pointed to one thing. They had done this intentionally and with confidence that I'd be too distracted, or too broken, to notice. But I wasn't broken. I called the fraud hotline, phone to ear while balancing Lyra in my arms. The hold music played longer than expected. When an agent finally answered, I hit record on my backup phone. "Can I confirm the names on this application?" I asked, voice measured. "Yes," the agent said. "The primary applicant is Rowena Fay. Co-signers listed as Maricel and Halden Fay. Application notes say, daughter approved use for family restructuring, verbal authorization given." Was that recorded? "No, ma'am. It says it was a phone verification." I ended the call, then scrolled back through my voicemail logs. I didn't know what I was looking for, until I found it. 2 weeks before I gave birth, a call had gone to voicemail while I was sedated at the OB's office. I'd never listened to it. I hit play. "We'll use Rowena's file," Maricel's voice said. "She's on bed rest. She won't notice. Just push it through before month end." No shame, no hesitation. The world tilted, but not from grief. From clarity. I took the file I'd started, Evidence, and renamed it. They left me. Now I'm leaving them. The next day, I called the legal aid office Lisette had written down in her note. A paralegal named Tanya answered. I laid out the details, each word crisp and practiced. When I finished, she didn't gasp. She didn't sound surprised. She just said, "This isn't just unethical, it's prosecutable." By the following Monday, the case file was complete. Not just fraud, but identity theft, misappropriation of funds, and intentional misrepresentation. I drafted 3 envelopes, each addressed by hand: Maricel, Halden, Valora. Inside each one, a subpoena notice, a court summons, a return receipt requested. They had taken a home in my name. Now they would receive paperwork with my name on it, but this time from a county clerk. I held one envelope in my hand a moment longer before sealing it. "You wanted me silent," I whispered. But I kept records. I didn't knock. I walked straight through the lobby of the rented wellness hall like I belonged there. Because legally, I nearly did. The velvet ropes, the soft jazz looping on hidden speakers, the women in cream-toned jumpsuits offering kombucha and champagne flutes. It all blurred at the edges of my focus. My eyes were locked on the stage. On her. Valora. Draped in something silky and white, barefoot on a jute rug, she sat cross-legged across from a local wellness influencer, microphone clipped to her collar, voice rich with rehearsed vulnerability. "Family," she said, "is the root of who we are, and healing doesn't mean ignoring pain. It means transforming it." I stepped closer. "Let's test that theory." She lifted her glass, ready for a toast. "To every woman who's ever felt unseen, unheard, unaligned, you're not alone. Not today. You're not." I stepped up onto the stage. My heels echoed against the planks. For the first time, all eyes turned to me. Valora's voice caught mid-sentence. "Row!" From offstage, Maricel's voice rang sharp and familiar. "This isn't your moment." I looked her way, her rigid posture, her forced smile already cracking. Then I turned to the crowd, then to the cameras. "Actually," I said calmly, "this is exactly my moment." I pulled 3 envelopes from my bag, thick, sealed, official. I handed one to Valora, one to Maricel, one to Halden, who had tried to blend into the second row like a beige painting. "You took my name to buy your house," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You took my credit to fund your vanity. You built a temple of lies, and this is me, tearing it down." The room rippled with a gasp. Valora opened her envelope slowly, fingers trembling. Her lips moved silently as she read. Maricel froze halfway through hers. Halden looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "You're being sued," I said, answering the question no one dared ask aloud. "For fraud. For identity theft. For everything you did while I was bleeding and birthing in the backseat of a stranger's car." The live stream glitched, the screen flickering as producers behind the scenes scrambled. The influencer, sensing a PR nightmare, stepped off stage. Maricel grabbed her clutch and started ushering people out with that brittle cheer she used to use at PTA meetings. "It's a misunderstanding," she called out. "Just a family disagreement." Someone near the front whispered, "Is this real?" I turned to them, locked eyes. Realer than anything they've ever posted. The silence that followed was thicker than any courtroom. I didn't wait for anyone to escort me out. I turned and walked off that stage without another word. No drama, no shouting, just justice. And when I reached the exit, I didn't bother to close the door behind me. The echoes did that for me. The morning after the launch party felt different. Not louder, not brighter. Just heavier in its silence, like the world was holding its breath. My inbox was full before noon. People I hadn't heard from in years forwarded me clips of the event. TikToks with captions like, "Sister turns family's lie into legal storm," had already gone viral. Screenshots of Valora's stunned face, mid-sentence, had become reaction memes. But I wasn't watching for entertainment. I was watching for evidence of something deeper, how people responded to truth when it wasn't dressed in PR polish. Under Valora's apology post, I read every comment. "This doesn't feel sincere." "Wait, did she really steal her sister's identity?" "Not you selling peace while defrauding your family." Sponsors began pulling out by midweek. Her Wellness Line's partnership page went dark. The press release from the spa's parent company used the phrase, "temporarily suspended pending internal review." Meanwhile, I received a voicemail from Halden. His voice cracked 3 words in. "We're being audited. Your mom's name has been flagged. Valora's agency dropped her." He paused, took a breath. "We could lose the house, our retirement, everything." He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't say, "We were wrong." He only said, "We could lose." I stared at the phone and said aloud, "They're crying over the loss, not the betrayal." That was the problem. They hadn't just harmed me. They'd taught themselves to feel pain only when it came with consequences. The next day, I met with my attorney, a woman named Kiara, who wore navy suits and spoke like everything she said had already been confirmed in writing. We went over my case: the signed mortgage forged under my name, the credit card consolidations, the voicemail, the birth record, and the timeline of events. She looked at me over her glasses. Textbook fraud. They're going to offer a settlement. I'm not here to settle, I said. I'm here to restore. Kiara nodded. Then we push. By Friday, the court had accepted our filing. Subpoenas were issued. The title to the house, now frozen. The property Valora had filmed her launch videos in would sit untouched until a judge said otherwise. But I didn't celebrate. I spent the afternoon on my balcony, replanting the succulents I'd nearly let die during my last trimester. The soil was dry and cracked, but salvageable. I worked quietly, gloves on, phone face down. Power, I realized, isn't about speaking loudest or getting the most eyes on you. It's about knowing where the documents are filed. It's about proof. Real power is evidence. That night, I sat with Lyra as she fed, her tiny fingers wrapped around the edge of my shirt. Court papers were stacked on the kitchen table beside us. I looked down at her and whispered, "One day I'll teach you about strength, not the kind that roars, but the kind that endures, the kind that outlives lies." She cooed, unbothered by anything but the warmth of my skin and the rhythm of my breath. I kissed the crown of her head, then turned back to the papers. "They wanted me to disappear," I said softly, but I made myself undeniable. The envelope didn't have a return address, just my name, written in my mother's cursive. The same tight, overly tidy lettering she used on Christmas tags and church bake sale forms. It arrived on a Tuesday. No knock on the door, just sitting there in my mailbox, quiet as a secret. I knew what it was before I even opened it. Still, my hands didn't shake. Not anymore. I sat at the kitchen table with Lyra sleeping nearby, one hand on her bassinet, the other sliding the letter out with care I didn't owe. "Rowena, we didn't know. We thought you were strong enough to take it. We didn't mean to choose her. We just didn't think you needed us. If we could go back, maybe we'd choose differently. No, I'm sorry. No, we hurt you." Just lines designed to sound soft while doing no real work. Hints, excuses in poetic packaging. Not an apology, just a smudge of guilt lightly pressed onto stationery. I folded the letter once, then unfolded it, then folded it again. I pulled out a notepad, scribbled a reply, stopped, crumpled it, tried again, wrote 3 sentences, ripped those out too. By the time I reached the 4th attempt, the sun had shifted across the kitchen, and Lyra stirred once before falling back asleep. I placed the crumpled versions in the trash, left the blank page under a mug, and whispered, "You don't get to cry now that I'm strong. You should have cried when I was breaking." That afternoon, I took Lyra for a walk. The park was quiet, dotted with families capturing fall photos under golden leaves, matching flannel, laughter forced between frames. We passed a young mother kneeling beside her toddler, trying to get him to smile for the camera. He resisted. She laughed. Her partner took another shot anyway. Some people heal by reconnecting, some by forgiving. I healed by detaching. Lyra looked up at me with those big, serious eyes. I smiled down at her. "We don't need a photo to prove we're real." We walked a little farther. The sun dipped lower, warm but gentle, like it wasn't trying to prove anything. When we got home, I pulled the letter from my coat pocket and slid it into a folder at the back of my filing cabinet. I labeled the tab. Closed. No fire, no fury, just finality. I poured myself tea, the kind I used to share with Maricel before she stopped asking about my life, and started posting quotes about releasing toxic energies. I sat with the warm mug and watched Lyra sleep on the couch beside me, her tiny chest rising and falling with rhythm and ease. "They lost their daughter the day they left her on that highway," I murmured, And I met myself that day instead. The judge's ruling had been clear. Full control of the property was awarded to me. The deed was corrected. The liens cleared, and within 60 days, I had the keys to the house my family had stolen in my name. I sold it the next month, then bought it again, under a nonprofit. Not in my name this time, but in my daughter's. And just like that, Leora Serenity Spa was no more. The banners came down, the crystals were boxed up, and the influencer buzz around it dried up like an Arizona creek in July. What stood in its place now bore a new sign, one unveiled with no press, no stream, just hands that had known enough abandonment to recognize a shelter when they saw one. Lyra's Mercy Foundation. The first woman we welcomed walked in carrying a grocery bag and a toddler. No stroller, no backup, just desperation disguised as dignity. We gave her blankets, food, a crib. I didn't ask her to tell me her story. I just said, "You're home now. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself they never cared to listen to." She cried quietly as she rocked her child. "They left me on a highway," I told her later, "so I built a road for women like me." That afternoon, I stepped outside for air. The building behind me was simple. Stucco walls, a roof that didn't leak, beds that stayed warm. But it was ours. It stood because I didn't fold when they tried to erase me. Across the street, I saw them. Maricel and Halden sat in a gray sedan, windows halfway down. They didn't move, didn't get out, just watched. I didn't wave, I didn't nod. Instead, I bent down and lifted Lyra into my arms. She was nearly a year old now, solid and wiggly, with the fierce independence that children only get from women who survive. I carried her to the porch steps, the very same where Valora once filmed her glossy tutorials on manifesting abundance. Lyra plopped down on the welcome mat and picked at a fraying corner. Inside the car, Maricel wiped at her cheek. Halden stared straight ahead, both hands clenched on the steering wheel. I looked right at them. My voice didn't rise, but it carried. "You left me in labor," I said. "I left you to learn pain." I didn't wait for a reaction. Inside the shelter, one of the interns handed me a folder. We'd just been approved for legal aid grants, enough to help a dozen more women next quarter. I signed the acceptance letter, flipping past the last page, and added a sticky note. "Strength isn't surviving the storm, it's building shelter for others during the rain." I paused, then signed my full name, no hesitation, no abbreviations. Rowena Fay. In bold print, in blue ink, on paper they could never steal. They thought they buried me, but I was a seed. And now I bloom, not for them, but in spite of them.